So getting back to Silk Road. So who are the drug dealers? Like, are we talking shaved head, tattoos? Sitting at home smoking bongs, getting pissed, getting for whatever, all that, or are we talking about like young tech savvy entrepreneurs, effectively?
Yeah.
Or is it somewhere in between, or a bit of both?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and
we don't really know, I guess, to a degree as well.
We don't know heaps because very few of them get caught. Because they're protected by encryption. You've got geographical separation between point of sale and the customer. So trying to police this stuff is extraordinarily difficult. But we actually, so one of the research teams that I run, we just wrapped up a series of interviews with active darknet drug dealers. So we posted a series of ads. We were like, look, we're critical of the war on drugs. We think that there's maybe harm reduction potential in the dark web drugs trade, and we want to hear. We think there's a different story to the one that's kind of been put out in the tabloid press, particularly about predatory dealers who want to hook your kids and blah, that sort of narrative.
Richard Nixon narrative.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we were like, but we need people to talk to us. If that narrative is there, and you want to talk to us about your experience, please get in touch. And we ended up, we did 13 interviews with dark web drug dealers around the world about who they were, what they, nothing identifiable obviously, but what they sort of got involved in it for. And about half of them had sold drugs in some capacity, usually at pretty small levels offline.
Yep.
The other half were like, nope, no way was I ever going to sell drugs. I was scared about possibility for violence, any kind of confrontation, worried about risk of police or whatever. Most of the people we spoke to came across as quite well educated, had pretty minimal financial goals. Like, these are not people who wanted to be Scarface.
Yep.
They're aware that the bigger that you become, the bigger target you are for law enforcement. Yep. They're like,
look, sort of side hustlers.
Yeah, people will be like, look, I started off, using Silk Road or something similar, to get drugs for me and my mates. Then we realized, actually, this is a pretty good way of doing it. And we had a little bit left over, so we'd sell that, and that would cover the weekend, partying. And then we realized, we can maybe make a little bit more money doing that.
Yep.
But yeah, usually people will be like, I just wanted to, get enough for a deposit on a house, or I wanted to pay off my student debt. We had a number of people talking about that. And we're like, right, okay, that's it's an interesting motivation. So it was pretty like mainstream sort of financial goals. It wasn't like driving Maseratis around. That sort of thing.
buying lines and putting them in your backyard and that kind of
stuff. I mean, I think that's there as well, but I don't think it's kind of representative of the most of the people that get involved.
No, that's fair. So what about, when you talk about these, very forward-thinking business practices, the fact that you're taking the drugs out of the streets and into the home, through your postman and so forth. And I already feel like there's going to be a lot more pros than cons, but can you talk to us about, just what you think are the pros, and if there are any cons in comparison to the old way of doing things with the new drug trade on the online stuff?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, the pros, so one of the big pros is questions around violence. So illicit drug markets tend to have quite low levels of violence. Violence is usually a sign that something's gone wrong. Somebody's defaulted on a debt, or that's probably one of the biggest ones.
This is offline. Did you say, or online?
This is offline. Offline. But generally, levels of violence, are pretty low. But there's always the threat of violence, right? The threat of violence, whether it's from the bikie gangs or whatever organised crime groups, because if somebody defaults on a deal, they got to know there's going to be some sort of payback, and it usually doesn't involve the police, because these people, they've got a code of not getting in touch with police usually. So there's this threat of violence, and if you're a drug dealer, that most people think, they'll be worried about the cops. Well, they might be worried about the cops, but the real danger is, you Chopper Reed sort of type, who's a standover man who's going to, if they figure out that you've got a stash, they're going to come in and chop off your toes until you hand it over, and maybe you don't walk out of there alive. So there's dangers there, and then maybe you go, okay, well, if I'm up against that sort of threat, maybe I need to buy a gun, or maybe I need to affiliate with a bikie gang who can offer me protection, or whatever. So violence is a valuable commodity, in the illicit drugs trade, and it's about 3/4 of the organised crime in this country is funded by the illicit drugs trade.
Really?
It's huge.
Wow.
It's the lifeblood of organised crime in Australia, and it is across much of the world as well.
Far out.
And it's not because of what the drugs do, it's just how much they're worth. You've got demand, you've got supply, you've got around $600 billion, global, drug trade, something thereabouts. People are going to supply that, and so anyway, so you've got a lot of risks, just in the trying to get a valuable product like that runs outside of state control and regulation. But you do it online, and then you've got dealers who are like, all right, well, I'm not worried about chopper read because no one knows who I am anymore. My supplier knows who I am, but they want to keep supplying to me, presumably. Or a lot of these suppliers are actually buying drugs on the darknet themselves and then selling them on the darknet. So they're not connected to any, physical illicit drug market. So it's kind of better for the sellers in that sense, but it's also better for the consumers because unless you know your drug dealer really well, having some sort of customer feedback that gives you at least a semi-independent indicator of quality or perceived quality of the drugs. And when you've got dealers 100%. Who they make their careers on having this reputation and this profile, you can go there and you can read 500 reviews and you go, all right, well, probably there's a good chance that this is actually MDMA or this is the strain of weed that I'm trying to buy. You have a better idea about what's in the drug, what adulterants may or may not be in it, a better idea about dosage. So, that all can help control the harms that are associated with the illicit drug use. Because obviously if you know what you're taking, then you can decide, do I want to have half or do I want to have two or, whatever it might be. So there's benefits there as well. The sort of cons that exist, there's pros and cons. Usually, so there's some really interesting research done by a lady called Monica Barrett, who I work with, and some of her colleagues. And they did a bunch of interviews with drug users about what happened to their drug use when they first started accessing these sites. And the name of the paper is... what if you live on top of a bakery and you like cakes? And people would describe just going, wow, I just suddenly started buying all this stuff and their drug use would increase. But then pretty quickly, they'd be like, oh, no, I can get this anytime. This sort of famine mentality of like, oh, right. It's a bit like when they call last drinks at the bar. You're like, oh, shit, all right, we better all start drinking heaps. But if the bar doesn't shut, people go, okay, well, you just have what you want.
That's
so they found that there was sort of this initial spike, but then it would tail off pretty quickly and people would just, revert back to whatever they were doing usually. Usually people, it's the funny thing about drug use as well. Like people tend to think that a lot of the harm comes from just the availability of these drugs and we need to restrict the availability. The fact is we're doing a really shit job of restricting availability.
Oh, I've never in my life, I don't take drugs anymore, but I never went a night where I was like, oh, damn it, we couldn't get any drugs.
Yeah, if you want
maybe 1 in 50.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you can't get exactly what you want or you can't get the quality you want or whatever, but the availability, it exists if you want it. So these drugs aren't making things more available than they would otherwise be. The exception being like really niche kind of drugs, so ayahuascas and your DMTs, but they're not drugs of addiction anyway.
I got some. Where's this, buddy? What is it? I got some ibogaine over there.
Oh, really?
This is ibogaine here. This little vial.
Wow. Okay.
Is ibogaine. I got it. That. May love be your truth. Adam Isaac Miller. He wrote that in this little thing. He's a dude that came on the show, and he's medicinal marijuana and advocate.
And that's an anti-addiction drug, right? And people
that's
use that to quit things.
That's right.
So people, it's people who have dysfunction in other parts of their life. A lot of it has to do with trauma as well. If you've suffered, a series of traumas in your childhood, they're the ones who are most likely to not be able to have a healthy relationship with their drugs, whether it's booze or whether it's something illegal as well. Most people, they, maybe you go out and you start taking, pills for a while and then you realize, hang on, this is impacting my work or I'm coming down all the time or I'm starting to fail at uni. And most people at that point go, all right, I'm going to wind it in. So I think, and this sort of ties into what you were talking about before with legalization. These drug laws are not keeping us safe. They make the drug war, more dangerous. It's essentially what they're doing is they're saying, all right, we need to make this as dangerous as possible to convince people to stop taking it. So, that's why we kind of pill testing, for example, because they're like, oh, it would send the wrong message. It's a bit like saying, okay, well, we better take seatbelts out of cars because, if you've got seatbelts,
people would think that cars are too dangerous to drive.
Yeah, you're going to encourage people to speed. There should be the threat of imminent injury. And we're like, well, no, we don't do that with, any other sort of, thing. But with drugs, there's this kind of still moralistic sort of attitude towards them that people deserve what they get, and if they die, well, sometimes you got to break some eggs to make an omelette, and it's a pretty shit omelette that we've made for ourselves.
Yeah, I agree.